audio purposes.
All right, perfect. All right, you good? Okay. Key, I want to start with really just kicking off with what you mean to me. So there are 10 words that I want to share with you that I believe describe who you are. And then I want to read a letter that I wrote for you as well. So selfless, caring, compassionate, empathetic, intelligent, determined, relentless, fierce, beautiful, and loving. Kia, thank you for being my best friend and for your countless sacrifices. Your sacrifices have bettered my life and the lives of every individual, who has had the gift of having you in their life. We lived a life of trauma, hardship, sadness, and at times beauty and joy. You're always the beauty and the joy in the life during those challenging moments for me. I don't ever remember seeing you depressed or sad as a child. I can count on one hand how many times I've experienced you unhappy or depressed as an adult. You have always led by example and shown me how to show up and lead without telling me what to do directly. Thank you for being my best friend and showing me throughout this life. I pray that you know that I will always have your back and support you in any direction you decide to take your life. I want to thank you for being selfless, raising me, leading by example, showing genuine care to everyone you encounter, being an exceptional mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Thank you for being faithful and a servant of God. Thank you for your compassion you continue to show, both Ma and Dad frequently. You constantly challenge my thinking and my outlook on the world. You make everyone's lives better around you. You're strong, confident, resilient, tenacious, and many additional adjectives. You are my best friend and I am yours. I will forever be in debt to your selfless acts of service and kindness, which have positively impacted my life. Continue to be a woman of faith, love, pure kindness, grit, determination, confidence, and drive. Teach your kids and mine what you quietly and confidently taught me. I love you, and I will forever be in debt to you. Kia, thank you.
Thank you. That was nice.
So who is Kia, and how would you describe yourself?
I'm a mother, a Christian, an aunt, a sister, by training, a nurse practitioner. But most importantly, I feel like my role in the family is one that is very important to me. And I feel like that kind of encompasses who I am, like in my personal family and then also to my extended family.
What do you think our upbringing really just taught you about, yourself and really more of your style dealing with a drug addicted mother and a father that was in prison?
So I think our childhood has taught me strength and resilience. I think that, and to be comfortable who I am, like in whose I am. I know that there was no way that I would have made it this far without Christ. We should have been products of our environment and we were not. I think that I have a mentality to where I always push myself to grow and to see the glass as half full. And I think that has all come from just how we were raised. And I find beauty in our childhood and the things that some people see as like being really traumatic. I've been able to use those experiences to help like me become the woman that I am now and to like persevere and grow. And I don't feel like it's much that I can't get through because of the things that we experienced as a child.
And you mentioned Christ. So, when I think back to really just our childhood and like dealing with like, mama being gone from time to time and dad being in prison for so long, how did you retain faith, as a child growing up and honestly through college as well?
So I always knew life was better than what it was that we were living. And nothing could be worse than that. And I saw examples of like a strong like Black family and just how they functioned, the family functioned and how the kids functioned. And I knew that God wanted better for me. And I think when you are a child and you live in an environment where it's so chaotic, you have to find some hope to be able to hold on to help you push through. And I remember being like 7 or 8 years old and like kind of writing out my goals for my life. And I think that that's just kind of like the epitome of who I am. Like, I feel like I'm always thinking about, you know, what's my next goal? Like, what do I want to achieve? And I remember being like 7 or 8 years old. And at the time, I was dating a guy like that was 8th grade that I thought was the love of my life and I was going to be with him forever. And I would put Kia Green, you know, on the paper. And I'll put like, I'm going to be a nurse. I'll be a pediatric nurse. I'm going to have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I'll go to college. I'll get married. I'll become an AKA. And I remember, you know, like having this sheet of paper and like periodically opening the paper up and just looking at that. And like really what it did is like, I need things to strive towards. Like I have to think about like what's next for myself. And so I would look at that like when things were like tough and I would like say like, you know, but I'm gonna make it out. I'll make it out. People say like, no, you won't, you know, like you guys are poor, you know, your mom's addicted to drugs, your dad's in jail, you can't do this. But I take no's and people not believe in me as fuel to be able to push through into like what's next. And so I think me praying to God and just like having like that faith. I saw Papa like read his Bible every day. He was like a man of integrity, like Christ led his life. And I remember like just seeing like his devoutness to religion and me just knowing that like the only way for me to get out of where we came from was I needed God. And I don't think at that age I understood that, but I've always believed in a higher being. And then once I got to the point where I could really understand God, especially in college, I knew that like I needed him and there was no way for me to even get out of that environment without him.
Yeah, I mean, that's super powerful. And like for me, I think growing up in you know, I've spent my entire life almost treating our relationship like a case study. I feel like you've always been confident from me being like 4 years old, as far back that I can remember, until now at 36 years old. And it taught me confidence, you know, because I feel like being poor, coming from nothing, and then being able to experience and seeing somebody like you that also comes from that situation. I just remember you constantly being, you know, a woman of like the highest level of confidence. Where do you feel like your confidence was derived and where did it come from and how did you maintain and retain it?
So I remember seeing like our mom, like as her best version of herself. And when I was a little girl, I remember looking at her being like, she was the most important person in my life, like the center of my being. And I remember I've never in my life seen a woman more beautiful. The way she carried herself, you know, the epitome of who she was, like I idolized it. Like I remember being young and her saying like, my favorite color is yellow. And I'm like, yeah, my favorite color is yellow too. Or her being like, I really love this. And me being like, I really love that too. And I always, from a young age, just felt a sense of like, I had to protect her. Like I had to just idolizing her as a woman. And I also remember seeing that change, but I think at that moment when her life started to like kind of go downhill, I remember what she used to be and like the potential that she had. And I think that I channeled that like within myself. And it's funny because we had nothing. And I remember like not having food to eat or not like having a phone or getting cars repossessed. But I just remember always just being so confident in like who I was that it didn't matter. I think that when I would go around other people and meet other people, I always felt so secure in who I was that we had nothing. And most kids that come from environments like that, they don't know how to still find light and just be comfortable in who they are. But I feel like I just knew probably, I think, through who our mom was and like how she conducted herself. And I saw myself in her and I knew that like I had to be different or else I could have the potential to go down that road. So I pulled from her, which was like good and pure. And I used that to take to my, like within myself to be able to push me into who it is I am today.
Yeah. it's so fascinating to hear that side for you, because I feel like her being that beacon for you, and then you were the beacon for me as well, because it was easy for me to follow your lead, because you provided all the adjectives that you just shared, like the purest example of like what true confidence was, like leading by example, doing the right thing, making the right decisions, even when times were exceptionally hard. So I just want to say, like, I'm grateful, and I appreciate you for making those selfless sacrifices, because it's only been, you know, beyond helpful for me as I navigate my life, and especially, you know, like transitioning into fatherhood and you know, being a husband now and trying to lead and be a man of faith as well. I think having that example, even to this day, that you continue to provide that example, I have the utmost just respect and admiration for you doing that. So thank you. I do want to pivot a little bit now and ask you, and really just share with you, I feel like you're doing a fantastic job raising two exceptional children. And it has never felt as if you had to put your career goals on hold for the sake of having a family. What advice would you give to those women holding off on starting their families out of fear of like their careers getting in the way?
So there was time, quite a bit of time, like in my first marriage, where I did feel like I had to halt different things I wanted to do in my career because it worked well for the family. Like I felt that marriage was going to sustain forever. We'd be together forever. So it was okay for me to kind of take the back seat for him to push forward within his career. And it was also important for me during that time for me to be the constant and like the foundation for like my kids and stability for them. So I took jobs that I hated and because it just worked well with the family. And I think that was okay. But during that time, I thought about like after my kids were bigger and they were in school, like what did I want to do with myself then? That's why I went back to get my doctorate, because I didn't think that the working force would respect a woman saying, oh, I want to stay home and raise my children throughout those couple years. So I thought, instead of me saying I wanted to stay home and raise my kids, I could add into that, well, I got my doctorate too. So I was able to go back to school, get my doctorate, and it would justify me not working during that time, or maybe taking jobs that I didn't necessarily love or weren't as challenging. So I think it's okay for women to take a pause on, you know, like their career in order to family plan or do different things. I also think it's okay for women to say, I want to pursue my career and pause on having children. But I think that it's important for them to make sure that they're doing it for reasons for their own, like not for anyone else, that they're making decisions that are based off of the decisions that they want to make, because then at the end of the day, you can look back and be happy with that. Like, so yeah, I worked jobs that were, you know, ridiculous. I hated it, but like, it was more important for me to be with Carter and Kennedy and like watch them take their first steps and have play dates with them and just kind of watch them grow and develop. It was okay for me to go to jobs that sucked and like I absolutely hated it, because that time I cannot get back. And now they're bigger. So I'm able to make career choices that are good for me, that with doing things that I want to do. Cause I always feel like I battle this like in between of being this like really successful bomb career woman, but then also being like an amazing mother and wife. So I'm always teetering the line between both. And I think that we live in a world now where women can do that. And like you could be a successful career woman and you can also be a successful contributing piece to your family too.
I think if you don't already know this, I know like you're doing an exceptional job doing both. And I think it's special to just observe. And again, like not even only with Carter and Kennedy, your kids, but with Tatum and Benjamin, like Tatum looks at you as like, again, I think that bright and that guiding light that I always felt as a child and even now, and seeing the next generation come behind us and being able to observe you as well, I have seen Tatum's confidence just go through the roof. And I know that it's largely in part due to like just your leadership, how you show up, like how you talk to the kids and what you do and how you lead, you know, your kids and also my kids. So again, something else that I'm grateful for.
I think that we come from very strong women. Like I remember when I was going through my divorce, and then I thought like, man, my kids have never seen me cry. And then I thought back, I've never seen any women in my life growing up cry outside of a funeral of someone that was close. That's it. And then I remember saying like, man, I'm sending the wrong message to my kids, because it's one thing to like to persevere and like push through. That's all I know how to do. I've never in my life have ever seen a weak woman in my family. Never. I mean, our grandmother left a marriage that was bad with 7 kids, and she moved on and married another man and didn't have any money, on a bus with 7 kids. And I just remember thinking about her and being like, all the things that she would tell me, the lessons of like when I was leaving to go to college, of like, making sure that you get your degrees, you make enough money to where you can always take care of your kids, and you're not, relying on a man. Is not saying that it's a dig to a man, because her husband was amazing. Like our grandfather was amazing, but it was a lesson in the fact that like anything could happen. Your husband could die, he could get sick. You need to make sure that you are always able to take care of yourself and your children. And that is something that I tell the girls now, in our family, because it is very important for them to, understand that and always remember that, because you don't need a man, you're so independent. It's not that. It's about like, at the end of the day, anything can happen. And will you have a plan to make sure that you are always able to take care of yourself and your children, because your children are always going to look to you to make sure that they're good.
Yeah. And I mean, that's amazing and sound advice. Can you talk more? Because again, the same strong foundational women that we have seen our entire lives growing up is like, that's exactly what you have exemplified your entire life. And for me, the only time that I saw you broken for even like a moment was when you were going through your divorce.
Oh yeah.
And I remember talking to you on the phone like it was yesterday. It was like a defining moment of my life. And you were sad, and then you started to cry, and I was like, in my head, I was like, this is different. I haven't seen her in this light, and she needs help. She's not going to say it directly, but I remember asking you, and I was like, what are you worried about? What are you concerned about? And you were like, I don't want the kids in an apartment, like how we were raised. And I remember, I was like, I talked to India. I was like, we got to figure this out. Like, we were about to buy, in a small apartment. And I was like, God is telling me we don't need to do that right now. That's not what we need to do. We need to buy a house. And she was just like, okay, well, why? And I was like, I think he is about to get a divorce. And you didn't say that to me on the phone. I just felt it. I legitimately felt it. And I was like, we need to buy a house. Like, she doesn't want them in an apartment. I don't want them in an apartment. And India was like, buy a house. Go buy a house. And doing that and having you guys, pivot in, and just seeing you go through that process, I know it was really, really hard. Can you share more about like how that had an impact on you both personally and professionally? Oh,
sure. Like, I think me getting a divorce almost broke me. And it's funny because, we had such a challenging childhood. So you would think after that, you're like, oh, nothing can. But I think when you think about, that's the first time I've ever experienced failure in my life. I just have never failed at anything. And I think that, but it challenged me because I think that I felt like I had to be a perfectionist. I was the person who, said, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to become a nurse, and then I'll become a nurse practitioner. I'm going to find the man, I'll get married, I'll buy the house with the white picket fence, I'll become an AKA, because that was always something I wanted to do. So check, check, check. Like I lived by like a checklist. And I think I knew that I picked the wrong person. So funny, like the day we went to our first premarital counsel, like it was times even when we were dating that I would say, we need to break up, because I felt like there was fundamental differences that I felt in my gut that like he wasn't a good match for me. But then I would, allow him to convince me into something different. And like, I also would say, well, it's been so long. You guys have been together for so long. And I even met other guys who would pursue me, like when I was in college, that I felt like would be a better match for me. But at that time, I'm like, well, you've been together for so long. And it was about this list, like always checking the box on this list. Like, you've been here so long, like you got to figure this out. Like, you guys can stay together. So even the time when we got engaged and we went to our first premarital counseling, like the Holy Spirit was like, we got this binder and it said, God's way of finding a spouse the world's way of finding the spouse. I would never forget it like it was yesterday. And I remember looking at this, and I remember God was telling me like, I didn't tell you marry him. And I remember saying, well, we picked a date, we got the people, like, we'll figure it out. I mean, I was 24. I was like, we'll figure it out. And I think that I've never prayed for something so much in my life for that marriage to work. And I never felt so lonely in my life. And I never dealt with anyone that made me feel like that in my life. And but I still really loved him. And I thought, he'll grow up, he'll change, he'll all those other things that people tell you. And it wasn't a lot of wisdom to where someone was saying, no, Kia, like, this isn't right, whatever. But so when I got to the point where it's like, I'm done, I think it was the pandemic. And I remember someone saying like, it talked about how they experienced love from a significant other. And I said to myself, you have never experienced a love like that. So if you were to die tomorrow, you would have died never experiencing true love. I mean, I had like a true experience of like a childhood love. That was my very first boyfriend. Like, I know he loved me and I loved him, but that was like kid, like, but as an adult, I've never experienced at that time a true like love from a man. And so that I was in a partnership with. And so because of that, I was like, you gotta go. And then I remember just being so depressed and miserable. And I'm like, this cannot be the life that God wants me to live. Like, what example am I leaving for my children? Like, I don't want my son thinking this behavior is okay. I don't want my daughter to like choose to be with someone that's not the right person for her. And so that's where I got the courage to leave. But even with leaving, it broke me because it was the first time I had experienced failure on my behalf. I'm a very risk averse. I think about everything. I do make decisions based off of like what I want to do. And I try to avoid making mistakes. And that was a major, because it was not only affecting me, it was affecting my family, not only my children, but you guys as well. And this was like I was the first person in our family really to get a divorce. Yeah, our grandmother got a divorce, but we weren't around then. So it was like that portion of it, the embarrassment of like having 2 kids and not being married and all of that. And I think it was literally me seeing the White House and a picket fence, this idea of like this family coming to an end. And that was scary to me because I think that I didn't know what this was going to look like for me. I didn't know what it was going to look like for my children. And I remember talking to you once on the phone, and there was times that I would literally be like crying to God, like, help me get out of this. I don't even know what's going on, what we're doing. And I remember talking to you one day, and I felt like I was like at my wit's end. And you were like, because I'm not a fighter. And I knew that this was going to be the fight of my life, more so for my kids' sake. And I remember you saying, Kia, like, get through this. Like, we've been through way worse in our life. Like, you need to push through. And I remember getting off the phone and I was like, I do. Like, yes, like my childhood was way worse than this. And I remember just, although going to court, that was the first time I had to go to court in my life, and feeling like you're fighting for your children, because that was the most important thing to me. It wasn't about money. Like, I knew I would be okay. It was about Carter and Kennedy. And I remember saying to myself, like, you have to put your big girl pants on and you have to fight. Like, you will never have to fight like this ever in your life, but you got to do it. And I think after that conversation, it just changed my perspective with like how I felt. And I think I remember saying to myself too, like, this is a smidget of time in your life. Like, this 2 years is such a small fragment of time. Like, you don't feel like it is because you can't see 6 months to a year down the road. But I remember telling myself, like, just push through. And I did. And when I tell you, I know that I showed up in that marriage. I wasn't perfect, but I showed up in that marriage as the best version. And I wanted nothing more for that to work. So I could leave out feeling very okay and happy with like my decision, because I had no regret. I don't believe in mistakes. I got 2 beautiful children out of that. So I would go back and do everything the same way that I did before, because the end result was great to me. And that's having Carter and Kennedy, and just even the woman who I am now based off of that.
What Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And it's, fascinating to hear the intimate details of all of it. And you did, I mean, you fought, you pushed through, you made it through, you're on the opposite end of that, and you persevered, right? And I think that, like, for me, in my hardest moments and my most challenging moments, it's very easy for me to take my mind mentally back to our childhood, because I'm like, oh, I won't ever have to navigate anything as difficult as that. And even when you were going through your divorce, I knew that it was the hardest thing in that moment that you were going through, but it was easy for me to remind myself of, like, individually we can conquer everything, together we can take over the world.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And that's how I feel. But last question, just revolving around your divorce, what helped you heal coming out of it?
So I did a lot of therapy, brain spotting, because I think, like, one of my girlfriends who's a therapist, she's like, Kia, you need to brain spot. Like, she understood my childhood. She's like, you need to, I remember she would tell me that, but I was like, oh yeah, whatever. But I remember first filing, and I said to her, like, how people end up, like, leaving a relationship and they end up being with the exact same man. I said to her, I cannot do that. Like, I cannot. So I need to figure out, like, how do I get to the bottom of, like, what is in me? Like, what do I need to grow? What do I need to figure out to where I don't recycle the same relationship over and over? And I remember like brain spotting and just, like, having some self-realizations of, like, a lot of fears that I might have had. And I think I know what I was doing through brain spotting was reliving my childhood and my marriage. And what I mean by that was, like, I found security through you and Kinky. I knew that, like, you guys were never going anywhere. You guys are the constant, where I knew that it was never an option for us not to always be connected. And I did that same thing in my marriage. So, like, my children were my constant. They're always gonna love me. They're always gonna be there. We will always have a solid, strong relationship. But the way that our parents made me feel was the same way I felt within that relationship. And I didn't know that until, like, I did brain spotting, and I realized just some things about myself and, like, fears that I might have had of, like, who I was trying not to become, and realizing that I wasn't that person. I was somebody that was totally different. So I think that probably was the main thing for me.
That's helpful, super helpful. Just a few more questions for you. Shifting to a hopefully more joyful topic. But what do you believe are your top 3 most proud moments?
Most proud are my children, for sure. It's funny watching them grow and develop, because they're, like, the better version of, like, of us, you know what I mean? Like, as, like, I can see things about myself in them, but I think that they're so much better. And just all the things that they do, the experience that they're able to have that I didn't get to have, it just brings me joy. I also feel like another one of my most proud moments is getting an undergrad degree, because that, like, I've gotten my master's, I've got my doctorate, but I think my undergrad degree was the most important, because I was the second person in our family who got an undergrad degree. And it was, our grandmother wanted to do it, but then she got pregnant, had kids, she stopped. Our mom wanted to do it, but then she couldn't, because, there was limitations with her doing it. So it was an honor for me. And I remember, like, our grandmother just always being super excited about, like, me going to school and whatever she could do to help me just to push through. And, just always just, like, her level of excitement for me going to school. Like, I know that, like, obtaining that degree and who I am now makes her happy, because to be the second person in the family to be able to do that, I feel like our kids now, they can see and understand, like, how much I value education, how much all of us value education, and they can strive to even be better than what it is who we are today.
Yeah, that's good.
And then probably the third most proudest moment. Oh, I know, like, I think me just pushing through the darkest time in my life of, like, going through a divorce, reestablishing myself after kids, to be able to see myself now. I think it was so many times in that first marriage that I would never think that this person would be the result of, like, coming out of that. And so I think for me, I I never get embarrassed by like my childhood. I never get embarrassed by like my first marriage, because I think if I could be the voice for another woman or give like another woman some hope to be able to leave out of a bad situation, I'm okay with like me sharing my story to be able to help others.
Yeah, it's super powerful. So thank you again for sharing that. What advice would you give to women or men that are currently in either those dark times or struggling with hard times?
I think you have to always choose yourself. You can't lose yourself in a relationship, in life. You have to always keep your eyes focused on Christ, like, I had a difficult time relinquishing control. And so I remember having like these bantering conversations with God of being like, I'll give you 25%, but like, let me keep this other, or like, I'll give you 75%, but let me keep the 25, because I was afraid of giving like full control over to him, because I think I understood that if I did, I knew he was going to take me out of that marriage. I knew forever that like that marriage was not going to be the last relationship for me. And I knew that if I were to relinquish 100% control, that was where it was going. But I think now I make sure that I'm always praying to God to allow his will to be done, and for my steps to always align with like his plans for my life. Because I know that like one thing that I've learned throughout all the hardships in life as a kid, as an adult, is that God always sees me through. And it's because of him that I am here where I am today. Not because of anyone else, not because of me, not because of anybody else, but solely because of him. So I think that if people truly just put God first and at the center of their life, and like allow him to really, truly guide and navigate, and also in addition to that, making sure that you choose yourself in the decisions that you make, and not from a selfish point of view, but like I have to be the best version of myself to be the best version of myself for my husband, for my children, for my nieces and nephews, for my siblings. Like you have to be able to choose yourself too in all of that.
Yeah, that's good. My final question for you, lastly, what advice would you give to the generation coming behind you?
In addition to what I just said, I probably would say, don't confine yourself to a box. I think that who I am as a person, I don't feel like anyone else's way is the way that I have to live my life. Like, we have like this run-in joke in our family that we're like, I'm like, Kia does what Kia wants to do. So like, I will consult the people who know me very well. Like I'll tell you about something. I'm like, hey, what this and that. I'll talk to Walter or my friends or whoever. But at the end of the day, I'm going to ponder on it. I'll pray about it, and I'm going to choose what I feel like is the best decision for me. And so I think because of that, that has allowed me to be comfortable in making certain decisions for myself and not feeling like I have to like live within this space of like, this is the way that you do it. I feel like I can create the lane that I need to be in. And I've always just been like that. And I feel like that is a gift, for me, because I feel like, I can look at something and say like, hey, I want to get to here. And then I define the steps. And I pray about it to be able to get to that end result of where it is that I want to be.
That's super, super helpful. Kia, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for, again, being my sister and my role model, my best friend, and somebody that I idolize. I think it's as simple as that. I idolize you, and you continue to always show up when I need you. You support more than your family, my family. You able to partner well with my wife, which is, again, much appreciated, because at times mama can be challenging. But again, thank you for everything, and thank you for your time today as well. I love you.
Absolutely. I love you too.
Thank you.
Absolutely.